Yeah. Appreciate you guys having me. It's a great honor to be here. I think the title of the paper that he just talked about, the creativity of that came from maybe my journalism background, ultra marathoners of human smuggling. But I came in from Texas yesterday wearing my boots, and my governor, as we well know, our esteemed governor, in recent weeks and months, has taken great issue with the question of refugees from Syria and whether or not we should accept them in Texas. And he's not alone. I think probably 29 or 30 other U.S. State governors have also raised this issue. It was a big issue in the presidential campaign, the question of what do we do with refugees, whether we should bring them in or not. I would call it almost a political infatuation with that issue. But from the standpoint of allowing refugees in the United Nations resettlement program in, I believe that is probably a fair issue to question in terms of vetting, extreme vetting, whatever you want to call it, but an equal issue that maybe should be contemplated not just by my governor but by pretty much other governors and the rest of the political establishment is the question of folks who are arriving at the border uninvited, show up at Texas, in my home state, California, Arizona. They hit the border. A lot of people don't recognize that prior to this issue of the refugees coming up, Syrians were already hitting the U.S. border by the hundreds. They were coming to California, they were coming to Texas, and they weren't getting there by invitation. So the apples to apples comparison isn't there. You have a United Nations refugee program in which individuals abroad are selected, vetted, abroad invited, approved, given public assistance, airfare, visas, all the rest, and then they are resettled. And there is a process there that is fair game for discussion in terms of how effective it is. But by the same token, there are many folks from the same regions coming to the border who get no such, they're coming uninvited, they get no such vetting. And when they show up, they're essentially saying, my name is X, believe me, we don't have any documentation, and here is my story, and I declare asylum. And that thus begins a process, a legal process that is quite different from the process that everybody has been talking about. And in fact, I would argue it's a process that has had virtually no attention comparatively with the other one. And so when we talk about border security, national security, and immigration, this is really where things meet. This is where the nexus is. We have in Europe over the past year and a half, and this is what's so baffling to me as well, is that in Europe we've had, when they had their refugee crisis, and then subsequently Paris, Brussels, and a long string of terrorist attacks by migrants. Most, if not all of those folks came in not as resettled UN refugees, they came in at the border. They came in after hiring human smugglers, traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles, thousands of miles in some cases, reaching that border and declaring asylum. It's starting a similar process, but in the European venue. I would assert that that is really the issue for us as well at the Mexican border, because there are smuggling organizations, networks. Those are the organizations that I have studied, I've reported on as a journalist, and then more recently as a student at the Naval Postgraduate School. These are smuggling organizations that are entrenched and established, complex, and they are able to move folks from Syria, Iraq, and from 35 or 40 other countries right up to the Texas border and then over. And in almost all cases, they declare asylum. They arrive often with no documentation. This begins a process that Art has written about. It begins with credible fear, and it's a process that is severely broken. There is, I would argue, virtually no vetting whatsoever of asylum seekers who arrive at the borders. And when people talk about the threat of border crossing, terrorists coming across, from the perspective of somebody who has studied this, I don't see this as what the likely scenario as of one of these folks coming in and then just opening up with bombs and guns and wreaking mayhem like that. I see them as coming in, declaring asylum, getting paroled in very quickly with almost no vetting, and then settling in somewhere for a few months, and then we'll hear about it, as they did in Europe and as they continue to do. Folks who have entered Europe have wreaked bloody mayhem across that continent. It's going on to this day. Every time there's an attack, almost every time, it turns out to be somebody who had come in through a broken asylum system, vetting system in Europe. And so I would argue that maybe the threat is a little bit higher here for that. I don't know how my time is, but regarding the smuggling, in my research, I discovered that many of the smugglers, the professional smugglers who are bringing these folks in, have come to count on our inability to detect fraud. In fact, to such an extent that they have built it into their business model. They depend on it. They rely on it. Without our broken system, they would be out of business maybe, because, and here's why. A lot of these folks, migrants who make it to the Texas border or the California border, Syrians, may invest anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 to pay their smuggler, to get the documents, to get the transportation. When they arrive at the border and they declare asylum, if they don't get to stay, that's a sunk cost and a lost cost. In many cases, this is a fortune. Now, maybe not for a terrorist organization, but nevertheless, this funding sustains these smuggling organizations. And so for that reason, the professional smugglers have determined that they have to learn as much about our asylum system as anybody in the United States CIS, Citizens Immigration Services. They are experts at our asylum system and how to game it. If they are not experts, then they're going to lose business, because if you get deported, then the grapevine gets back, and pretty soon you're not getting new clients fed into your pipeline. Okay, so that's issue one. But the other thing is what they've been able to do is determine that all they really need to understand and have their clients understand is what story to tell to get them through the initial skein of credible fear. Often,
you should explain what the credible fear.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's initially when you come in. I'll be very brief here, but initially when you come in, you're apprehended. You say, I declare asylum, and a USCIS officer will have to contact them and do an interview to determine and ask them, if you go back, what terrible things are going to happen to you. And if that officer checks box A, the asylum process begins. They can go to court, have a merit hearing, bond out, and all the rest of that. They're here. If they check the other box, no, they're deportable. They're going home. Okay? So it is absolutely crucial that they have the right story. And in many cases, I don't want to say that everybody's lying, but I just want to point out that we don't really know whether the stories, they're not so easy to verify. And at the credible fear level, at that point, that is the spot where it could be ascertained whether they're going to be paroled into the country and that they're going to stay here like they did in Europe. Okay. There have been a number of cases in my studies where this has happened. These are professional smugglers who have been prosecuted in the United States. And I'll just kind of go through a few of them to kind of give you a sense of what it looks like. What does this look like? And I'll start with Rakhi Gauchan. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. She was a Nepalese smuggler of what we call special interest aliens, or other than Mexicans, mostly Afghanistanis, Pakistanis. She was very prolific up until her 2013 arrest, and she was based mainly in Mexico and Guatemala. And she became a very, very recognized expert on our asylum system, particularly its vulnerabilities. And so she would, and the feds were able to get, informants up close to her, so we know this, that she was able to tell them which persecuted parties to say that they were affiliated with, for example, in order to, where they knew that the credible fear interviewer or even the judge later would say, okay, that fits our bill today. And these things change, and so Rakhi Gauchan had to maintain her expertise from day to day, month to month. She was such an expert that she understood that if one of her clients had actually come from Italy as opposed to Somalia, that if they disclosed that fact, they would be deported. So there was as much as omission as commission going on here. And at one point, she helped a man that she believed was a terrorist from Pakistan get into the country. That set off this nationwide manhunt looking for this guy. She thought he was. She didn't care because it's all about the money. Most of these folks are not ideologically motivated. So another prolific SIA smuggler went by the name of Ahmed Mohammed Dakhani. Dakhani is written about in this paper. He was prosecuted a few years ago, apprehended in 2008. He was actually a smuggler based in Brazil. He specialized in moving fellow Somalis. Dakhani eventually decided to give up the business and come in himself. This guy understood the asylum system so well that because he dealt with Somalis who normally show up with no documentation whatsoever. In Somalia, there was no government to give a driver's license, to give a birth certificate. So my name is Muhammad, and Al-Shabaab was mean to me was pretty much all you had to say, and you get credible fear and you're in. Except that Dakhani moved 7 people into the country with those fraudulent stories that he believed, individuals that he believed were Al-Shabaab extremists, and that set off another big manhunt all through the country trying to find who these guys were. Because by then they'd already gone through asylum, they'd received their asylum and were paroled in, okay? But then Dakhani himself, when he decided to come in, interestingly about him, he got through all the first screenings, was into the country, was in a detention center, and serendipitously, the FBI had an undercover in the Pearsall Detention Center in Texas, Somali, and they got in close together, and Dakhani started talking. And it turns out that he was a member of Al-Shabaab, active as a guerrilla fighter, arms purchaser, highly involved in his ideology, okay? Had it not been for that FBI undercover, he never would have been apprehended. And he was convicted of asylum fraud for omitting all of that information. And then I'm going to finish up here lastly with an individual named Omar Fidsi and Deka Sheikh. They came in together, 2 Somalis, in 2008. They were together, they were married. She was her credible fear story was that Al-Shabaab killed family members, so was his, but they pretended not to know each other. She very quickly got asylum and moved to Wisconsin. He was well on the way to receiving his asylum. However, that undercover FBI guy was still in there. And again, serendipitously, he acknowledged that he was Al-Shabaab. He had been involved in plots to murder the U.S. ambassador in Kenya, versed in weaponry. He had come to the United States to commit an unspecified terrorist act. Had we not known this, her asylum claim would not have unraveled. It did. They brought her back, convicted him of asylum fraud, and they got a terrorism enhancement, and both of them are still in prison now. But with those examples, I'll just kind of wrap up and turn the table over. One last reminder is that when they blow something up in Europe, and then our politicians talk about the refugee resettlement program, there's this odd disconnect for those of us who are involved in these issues. And I would just say that the border asylum issue requires fixing as well.